in the Parenting Beyond Gender panel, just so everyone's clear about what panelists is. My name is Carissa Weaver. I'm on part of the planning committee for this conference, so thank you all for coming. In a minute, we'll get to introducing the panelists, but I just wanted to talk for a minute about why trans and queer rights in the reproductive justice movement are so important. Because basically when we're talking about the reproductive justice movement, we're actually talking about use of bodies. What's acceptable use? Are we allowed to determine that? We're not allowed to. Does it have to fit in based on what we're born with? And how we're treated based on a lot of things, and a major determinant of it is our gender. And the fact that we even discuss reproductive justice as a women's issue says a lot about how gendered the movement is, but I feel like we often do not discuss the gender portion of it, and discuss how even talking about the reproductive justice movement forces us to talk in biological terms, which is uncomfortable for some people because their biology doesn't feel right to them or doesn't fit in. So I'm glad that we can have this panel to discuss not only raising children beyond misconceptions of gender, but also how children interact with our own identities. And in an effort to not speak to any person's story or try and tell someone's story for themselves, I would really like if each of the panelists could choose what's important to them. So, and I would love if all the panelists could introduce themselves and talk a little bit about why you're here, what's been important about your journey, and where you are as far as parenting and what influences gender has had on your parenting, as well as some of you have children who are genderqueer or trans. So I would love if you guys could talk about that as well. And please, let's start with Kimberlee.
Hi, my name is Kimberlee Kellogg. I am transgender, male, female. I was born with male anatomy or whatever, and I was raised male. And I don't know, I don't have a pinpoint of when I started the transition, but I always knew or felt that I, like a girl inside, so growing up it's a weird thing. You don't feel right and not quite sure why. And early on, I can't identify a time or point when it happened, but you do learn that that's not acceptable, and you better toe the line type of thing. So I basically, in my life, I repressed feelings, and I was raised very strict religious. I was raised a Mormon, and I believe that it was a trial that God was allowing Satan to give to me, kind of like Job. So I really identified with the story of Job in the Bible, hoping that someday, if I was righteous enough, God would remove this feeling of torment that I have about not feeling that I was in the right body or whatever. And it never went away. It's just always there, ever present, no matter how righteous you are. And that seeking for the righteousness led me eventually on into fundamentalist Mormonism. And I actually, I lived polygamy. I had multiple wives, and was in a little cult, a doomsday cult, that if our leader had told us to go out and commit acts of terrorism or whatever, I totally would have, because I got to do everything I can to prove to God that I'm righteous enough to get this taken away from me. And eventually I found my way out of that, and a few years later, 9/11 happened, and that, just seeing how the religious aspects of the terrorism and stuff unfolded, that was a catalyst to me to just become non-theist. And that opened up the opportunity for me to start to understand myself, ultimately transition. So probably about 6 or so years ago, a little more, more than that, whatever. I eventually came to accept and understand who I was and started to develop a plan of how and when I could transition. And it's been a long, hard road. I've been living full-time now for about a year and a half almost. And prior to that, probably 3-4 years, just switching back and forth. And like the last probably year and a half before I went full-time, I was living for the most part full-time at home and just living male at work. And you do that long enough, and it gets really hard and stressful. My stress was building and building and building until I finally came out, and life's been normal since then, really, which has been pretty nice. And the stress level just plummeted. I just living life now. And I have 3 kids. When I first came out to them, my daughter was probably 6 or 7, and my boys were 10 or 11-ish. But we had raised them to be open and accepting of diversity and presented to them as no big deal, and they've never had any adjustment issues.
So Clayton, if you want to go next. And it's his birthday, everyone. So I hope you.
Yeah.
So.
I'm 30, so I feel like I'm an adult now. I have to be on this panel. It's really exciting to be 30. I'm like so excited. It's been a great birthday already. So yeah, my name's Clayton. I'm a cisgender male, so I was born male, penis and socialized male, and feel comfortable with that gender identity. I have 3 kids, 10, 6, and 4. My middle child, Ember, was really gender non-conforming from probably, I guess it was like most obvious between 3 and 6, but over this past summer, he's definitely become kind of rejected a lot of how he used to live his life, and I'm totally happy to talk more about that in the panel as things come up. And my family is also raised Mormon, so it's really interesting. My parents left the Mormon church though when I was young, and so definitely different. But we also so that was interesting. My sister is a really badass transgender activist, and she's because of that, through osmosis, I know everything about gender politics. Not really. Actually, super humbled to be on this panel. I think a lot of what I'll talk about is more descriptive than prescriptive. I feel like as a parent, so many of the decisions I've made and continue to make, I wonder about and question as to if I'm doing the right thing. But I'm definitely happy to speak about my experience and more get other people's thoughts than say what I think is the right thing to do. And that's, so my kids having a transgender aunties definitely informed their gender politics as well. And just, the issues that have come up with there's been a lot of conversations our family has had around that, and some of our friends as well are queer and transgender, and Ember is non-conforming, his gender, exploring his gender identity has brought up a lot of questions for Obsidian, his older brother, and Kimberlee, his younger sister. So, I guess that's why I'm happy to be here.
Happy birthday. And now I feel really old since he's in his 30s, he's an adult now. I'm really old.
So Karen, if you want to, are you?
Well, so, hello. I feel a little bit out of place, but I am the parent of a genderqueer child. And when I say I feel out of place is I was raised in a very traditional family. And, you know, my father went out to work, my mother kept the house, very much Donna Reed type era. And when I got to be a teenager, I went through a lot of rebellion myself. And I remember thinking when I became a mother that we had gone through the age of drugs and boys with long hair, and it was so foreign to my parents to have to deal with all that, and they were so unprepared coming out of their generation. So when I became a mother, I thought, boy, their next generation can't do anything to surprise me. I'm strong. Because we were talking about this earlier, my two sons and I, about how, you know, as a parent, you grow up and you kind of relate to what you go through. And then when you become a parent, you're prepared to raise your children based on what you went through. And it's hard. It's hard to raise a child that's going through something that you've never been through. And not only that, but you know, it's you want your child to be safe. And when Craig started exhibiting signs where I kind of thought maybe, you know, I thought I can't acknowledge this because it's going to be such a hard lifestyle. And I can relate to Kimberlee because I prayed. And prayed, we were raised Catholic, which has a lot of guilt. And then I switched to Seventh-day Adventism. And that's what Craig was raised as. And so I thought, if I just pray hard enough, this will go away. And so, unbeknownst to me, you know, Craig would once in a while, he'd ask about, well, Mom, what do you think about, you know, somebody who's gay? And I would say, well, we have to love them, but we have to pray for them. And so it was very hard for him to feel comfortable growing up talking to me about it. And that makes me very sad. But the one thing is Craig. And when you have a child, you love that child. And I remember thinking I didn't want this for him because I knew what the world was going to be like and how hard it was going to be. And I saw him go through a lot of bullying at school. We had to pull him out of school because the school would not do anything about the bullying. And it was so bad that it was making him sick, physically ill, to think about having to go to school. He couldn't learn, he couldn't concentrate, and the school would do nothing about it. And it got to the point where he just needed to be loved as for who he was. And through that, I have learned so much because I realized that growing up in a traditional family and my older son being very traditional, you know, football, sports, you know, all of that, there's so many types of humanity, and there's such a spectrum of people. And what I've learned through the journey with Craig is that we're all human, and each of us is unique, and we all need to be accepted for who we are and loved for who we are. And there's no one that should ever make someone feel less of a person because they want to love a certain person. And I told Craig earlier that I think I know about this much, you know, about what it's like and what it is, the gender issue. But it's been an incredible journey and something I wouldn't even change for the world.
So I want to go back to you, Kimberlee, if you don't mind my asking. There's a fairly large body of research that really just says that people don't know how to discuss gender with children because it's such an ingrained part of our society. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you communicated to your children about your process as an adult and how they received that.
Okay. It would have to go back before I came out to anybody. Probably even before I was out enough to myself to understand who I was. We raised our kids, so my boys are 15 now, and when they were born, they were premature. They came out 6 weeks early. And one of the things we did to identify them between each other was we painted their pinky nails blue and green. And to this day, those are their colors. He's gotta be green, he's gotta be blue, it's hard. Dang it, you chose your colors for me. I'm so sorry. But we raised them with, in our gendered society, in as ungendered a way is kind of reasonable. I mean, we didn't go so radical as to not declare their gender or things like that, but we bought them baby dolls and, traditional boy toys and girl toys and exposed them to feminine life choices and stuff and masculine and things like that. And just kind of let them know throughout their whole upbringing that they're fine whoever they are and stuff. And to this day, they're 15. They're definitely not like the teenagers that I hear about. I mean, I hear all this things from my employees or on the news or whatever about how teenagers are so rebellious and whatever, and these guys are not. But, like one of them, there's some things that kind of make me sad. He really likes, what are those cartoon horse things? My Little Ponies. He really likes My Little Ponies, but he's conscious about how society has issues with people who don't fit the gender norm. And if we're in a store, he wants to go look at the My Little Pony toys, but he's not comfortable doing that, so he goes to his sister and says, "Hey, come over here and pretend that you're helping me." You gotta be different for somebody, so I can look at this. And so for Christmas, she bought him some My Little Ponies for Christmas. I don't even know what he did with them. He's got them in his room and stuff. But, I think that's, from a child rearing basis, that's kind of where I came from. And fortunately, my wife, she was raised apparently, even though they were Mormon, to be very open and accepting. I'm amazed at that. And she had a really hard time with me coming out and transitioning, and we're not together as a romantic couple anymore, we're platonic, but we are together as a family now. I mean, she did leave for about a year and a half with the kids. Had to work through things herself or whatever. And then my daughter, same type of thing. We raised her, just everybody got the same toys. My kids still have their baby dolls and their stuffed animals and love them and they'll keep them and everything. Her gender experience or whatever, she considers herself a tomboy girly girl. And I mean, her and I are almost like identical twins, really. Because I'm like a tomboy girly girl too. And her mom, my wife, she really is not girly. She does not like girly things. I don't even know if she owns any skirts or dresses. She dresses very gender neutral. And that's how she's comfortable. And she's uncomfortable that my daughter wants some of these girly things. And my daughter loves climbing trees and rough and tumble and everything. And same thing, just raising her to be whoever she wants to be and feels she's comfortable with. One thing I want to say about one of my sons, he might be queer, he might be genderqueer, he might be gay or bi, I have no idea. Try to make him feel comfortable that, however you identify, it's okay, right? And he's very introverted and shy and closed and stuff. And I do worry about him. He's one that likes
My Little Ponies.
He's a brownie.
Yeah.
That's her.
And I'm hoping that someday he'll understand who he is and be comfortable with himself. We did take him out of school very early because he especially was getting teased at school. Their grandma came out as lesbian when they were like in the 3rd grade or something. He'd just talk about it matter-of-factly at school, and kids started teasing him about being gay himself, and they draw these little stick figures of doing gay sex acts and stuff. And it was just, he'd come home just in tears. He was really uncomfortable, so we took him out and we've been homeschooling him since. Hope that answered that. I totally forget what
Hey,
you asked.
whatever you guys want to say. I'm just here as a mouthpiece, so if you want to talk about whatever you want to ignore my question, go for it. But you did. You did a great job. And Karen, actually, I want to get back to what you were talking about a little while ago, because I think that is something that a lot of people who have children and are thinking about having children are terrified of, is what if you make a mistake, or what if you regret something that happens before. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you built the bridge back to acceptance, and back to a relationship that I feel like is very, is more what you would like with your child, because I think that passes beyond just issues of gender, into a very universal sense of parenting.
Yeah, as Craig was growing up and I thought, started having those signs and just, not dealing with it. That was my way to deal with it, was just to not acknowledge it. I was afraid if I talked to Craig about it, that would encourage him to be gay, and I didn't, you're so scared as a parent that you're gonna do things that cause that. What was very astounding to me is I'm very fortunate to have some very good friends, some that are gay and some that aren't, but one of them, one day we were talking and they have a family member, and they said that they were really struggling with it, and the family member told them, well, why did you marry who you married? And he said, well, because I love her. And he said, but why? Why did you choose that person out of everybody in the world? Why did you choose that person to love? And he said, well, I was attracted to her. I was somebody that, I was drawn to. And he said, well, what makes you think that it's any different for us? Why do you think that for us it's a choice instead of a natural reaction to who we're attracted to? And that really opened up, a lot. It was like an aha moment. Like, this isn't something that that you made a mistake as a parent. It's something that's natural to that person. It's part of who they are, and they're following what they're naturally drawn to. And how can you tell somebody not to be who they are? Craig and I have had a very close relationship the whole time. As he was growing up, we've gone through a lot together. And all I knew was that no matter what, that he had to have somebody in the world who loved him, and he had to have a safe place to go. And it was very hard. It was very hard, like the initial times that when Craig finally, felt comfortable and just flat out telling me. He had moved up to Denver for a while, and he came back home and he told me, I'm gay. And he finally, he had made the decision that if it meant losing me, he had to be truthful with me. And that's when I realized how hard it was and how hard I had made it by not acknowledging it and just wanting to pray about it. But after that talk, then that's when everything started changing. And I remember it was really scary, the first times that I went out in public with he and his partner. And one thing about Craig is he doesn't hold back. I mean, he's like, this is me, take me as I am to the whole world. And, to be with them out in public and they're holding hands and they're being affectionate, just like any other couple would, that's the way it's supposed to be. It was really hard, and I remember walking through the store behind him, looking at people going, don't you dare look at my son like you, don't you dare. I mean, I was like ready to just, because I was so sure that, there was going to be this outright, things go on with people being so hateful to them, but it didn't happen, and it was fine, and the more the more that we talked and the more that I was around it, the more comfortable it became for me, and the more it made me think about all the people I know and all the people, where are they? I know I grew up and went through, I can think through school where there was the really macho boys, all the way to there was a boy in band that played clarinet that got teased all the time because he was very feminine in his characteristics and stuff, all the way from the girly girls to the very, the girls that were very tomboyish or, and I just remember how sad it is that we have to pigeonhole people into just this one little tiny area. And I guess I think of it more as Craig. I didn't raise Craig. I think Craig raised me because he's educated me so much. And I think for that's where we have to go a lot of times for parents that are going to be new parents or parents like me that have never had this before, in their family, is that education, that it's okay, that we're all human and we all need to be who we are, and that's okay. So.
So Clayton, I wanted to get back to what you were saying about your son's previous gender fluidity and now rejection of that. If you could talk a little bit more about that and how maybe that dynamic has evolved and how you are communicating gender acceptance through the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When Whitney and I found out that she was pregnant, and then did the ultrasound thing, the doctor said, "I'm like 60% sure that you have a girl." And all throughout Whitney's pregnancy, she just was like, "This feels so much different than when I was pregnant with Obsidian." She had these dreams, and it's like, in hindsight, like 60% is like, not even, like almost 50%. So, like, we just totally assumed that we were having a girl, and we didn't even have a boy name picked out. Partially, I think, because we just couldn't agree on one. But so it was a total surprise when he was born, and we didn't even have a name until the next day, and she just kind of out of the blue suggested Ember. It hadn't even been like a name that we had considered, but it just sounded right. And it's kind of funny because even like Ember is a real like gender neutral name, and his middle name is Kelly, which is also gender neutral. And even like as a baby, he was very different from Obsidian, just in his demeanor. He was so snuggly, and he is to this day. He's just like the most snuggly kid. And like Obsidian was super rough and tumble, hated to cuddle, like always just like, yeah. And so I can't even really pinpoint a time when it's like, Ember is like a lot more feminine than Obsidian did. It was just kind of, I don't know, I don't even know if I thought of it in like gender terms. It was kind of just more like, this is how Ember is. But then I guess when kids get older and right when you're a baby, you're not, whatever. It's not gender stereotypes as much fixed to you when you're 3 months old. But so as he got older and clothes have become more like gendered in our society, I guess I don't know if this was a good idea or not. I mean, we took the approach of just like kind of raising our kids with the general, like, he wore Obsidian's hand-me-down, like boy hand-me-down clothes. And remember we talked to a friend of ours who's transgender, and it's like, how do you think we should approach gender? Like, I have a friend who like every morning he'll ask. He's he's a transgender papa, female to male, and every morning he'll ask Oliver, "You feel like being a boy or a girl today?" Which I think is really cool. We didn't take that approach; it's kind of more mainstream, of just like following typical gender roles, but trying to be, I don't know, like if you want to wear a dress, you can get a dress in the store. If you want, you can play with whatever toy you want, just kind of following their lead. I don't know, now I'm rambling. So anyway, yeah, so as he got older, kind of when it became obvious that he was like more gender non-conforming, was he would get home from school and like shimmy himself into Cambrea's dresses. And she's already like small for her age, so like that was quite a feat for him to be able to do that. And then so first it started, and he would play pretend with her, and they loved playing princesses. Like it was just like they would do that after school, and they would stay in character all day long, and just like be princesses together, and yeah, they're super cute. And so it started with buying him some princess dresses because he just loved to play princess all the time. And so it kind of was like at school he was still, you know, Ember the boy, whatever, like boy conforming person. And then he'd get home and immediately put on the dress and become. And then he actually came up with like the alter ego of Amber, and we'd call him Amber, and he'd be the princess. And then, you know, and then he asked, he wanted a summer dress. He's like, I really want a summer dress. I didn't really know exactly what that meant, but so we're like, cool. So Eleanor, my sister, and we went to H&M with Ember and Cambria, and they freaking loved it. They just like lived it up. And I remember it was this really touching moment. We were in the changing room, and he had put on his summer dress he picked out. And he says, I'm magic. I can turn into a boy or a girl. And it's super touching and cute. And yeah, and then so he would stay in that character more and more. And that's when, for me as a parent, I became like super like hypocritical and kind of like, it had been so cute, like, up until that point, like, oh, like, because I, you know, a lot of my friends are queer and transgender, and so it's like, oh, Ember's so cute, like, it's so cool how he's, like, so gender fluid, and then, but now that he's, like, in kindergarten, and it's like, holy shit, like, I mean, he might be genderqueer, he might be transgender, like, there's all these things now, like, if he identifies as a girl now, and like, how's he going to handle school, and like, all these questions came up to me, and it's like, I need to talk to somebody. I have no idea what I'm doing. And so I talked with Eleanor, and I told her kind of my fears of just, kind of like you were talking about, just like, God, like, he's just gonna like get picked on so much. Like, I want to shelter him. Like, I just, you know, like the joy on his face, like at H&M, is just like broke my heart to think that one day he'll lose that innocence and be made fun of and feel ashamed for just like who he is and what he loves to do, and who, you know, just being himself. And she's like, well, it's not your job to protect him from being hurt by the world. Like, we all get hurt by the world. Your job is to love him, you know? So that's, I think it goes back to that, like, parenting is about unconditional love. And it's, yeah, so over the summer he changed a lot. He became much more like outdoors oriented. Also, I guess I should say, like, he never ended up, like, he would only, like, wear dresses and go by Amber and that, like, at home. And then he would start to do that at church. And this was all on his own. It was really interesting. Like, he never asked to wear a dress to school, even though he loved it. As soon as he came home, like, it was his favorite thing to do. And it's like, he knew that wasn't a safe space, I think. And because he did at church, like, and he knew that was a safe space. We go to the Unitarian church, and they're really great community in terms of gender, I think, so, and like gender expression. So yeah, I don't know, and like over the summer things really changed. Like I could see him change as a person. He was not as like snuggly as he used to be. He was like way more into like playing outdoors and like playing with his older brother and like kind of the more like, you know, like play fighting, roughhousing kind of stuff. And it's just had a really serious like backlash of like, I don't play with, I don't wear dresses, like that's girl stuff, I don't do that, that stuff's stupid, you know. And it's been interesting like seeing that, and I don't know how much of that is, I mean his older brother really struggled with it, and I know that he told him like times like, you're not a girl, stop doing that. And I would talk with him like one-on-one and talk about it's okay. But anyway, I don't know. So that's that. So he's really rejected it now. I think he's still super nurturing and caring and snuggly, but he doesn't live out like more feminine characteristics through dress or anything anymore. Yeah, and so I don't know how much of that's just him changing, how much is like his brother or like school. I don't think, like talking to his teacher, I don't think he was ever really teased at school, like because at school he was like way more gender conforming. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, so I have one more question before I throw it up to all of you, because I'm sure your questions are much better than mine anyway. So, if you could give the group one piece of parenting advice you wish you would have before you ever started having children, or however you wish to define it. So, one piece of parenting advice you wish you would have gotten.
You know, I guess for me it is not just advice, but just, you know, I remember when I was growing up in the town that I grew up in, there was a lot of racism, and you know, I just remember really siding with those individuals that felt like they were didn't have a fair advantage in the world because of their race and so on, and I was very prone to that. And having somebody say, you know, it goes farther than that. It goes to deeper than that. It goes to, you know, not just color, but who you are inside. And it's okay. It's okay to be a unique individual, and you know, it's okay to have a child that's very different. And how do you help keep them safe through that process in a world that isn't that accepting? It's okay to pull them out and homeschool them, or you know, we got a tutor for grade for a while, and then he got his GED. Thankfully, he was far enough through where he was pretty much where he could just go and get his GED and then get out into a world that was a little bit more accepting. I think the normal school system, kindergarten through 12th grade, is very, very different still for kids that are different. And you know, probably the advice would have been let him be who he is. You might want to do homeschool him, or you know, let him have a little bit safer path than trying to keep him in the traditional schools where it was very difficult. That probably would have been very great. It's just that it's okay. It's okay to accept him for who he is right now.
In hindsight, I question like the approach of like raising my kids kind of with the default gender norms, but with the option of like they can choose differently if they want to. Because I don't know, I think there's just this distinction of like we're like fighting for our collective liberation, and is that a liberation from gender or a liberation with gender? And it's sort of, I don't know, it's not something that I personally know yet, but I'm kind of leaning towards more of like from gender. And yeah, it's like I don't know. Because doing this, like having kind of a default and like, being like, there's so many assumptions and projections that you put on someone when I would kind of wish I would have gone the more radical way, like that my friend Simon has been taking, of really like questioning gender a lot. I don't know, because one thing I wanted to say is like when Ember would take on this Amber persona, I found myself relating to him differently. And it really made me question, like, how much am I doing, like, how much Kimberlee loves to roughhouse with me, and yet I do that very much less than I did with Obsidian when he was her age, And so I just wonder how much I limited myself taking that approach. So that'd be my advice, I guess. Is I don't have like advice, but just really think about that, I guess.
I guess the advice that I don't know if I word it as advice, but it kind of ties in a lot with what
Clayton.
Clayton was saying. It's as well as the experience he's shared with us about his son. Love and accept your kids, and they are who they say they are. There are kids that are fluid. There are kids that are very gendered, and freedom from gender or of gender, or whatever. It is a big question. I would want to have a just non-gendered everything, but there's definitely a spectrum that everyone experiences. Everyone feels a gender of themselves. But of course, gender is a social construct anyway. And hearing the stories here, there definitely is fluidity. My daughter, she definitely presents with gender fluidity. I think she does identify as female. She hasn't said she doesn't, but she really likes to dress like a boy sometimes, and sometimes like a really pretty girl. So she's asking if she can get some like a suit, and she wears a male fedora sometimes and likes neckties. And one day she'll dress up as masculine as she feels, and the next day she'll dress up as girly as she feels. To just be able to accept your children for who they are and as they are, and not try to make them fit any kind of a role. I think that would be my advice.
It kind of made me think about it, but what's really interesting is when you talk about relating different to your son when they present different. It made me think about my relationship with my two sons, and Craig's older brother is very traditional, and I think Craig lives a much more free life because he's accepted who he is, and I've accepted who he is, and I feel much more comfortable around Craig and relating to Craig than I do my older son, who's very traditional, because it's almost like I wonder how many people in the world are living their life because that's what they think they're supposed to do, instead of questioning it. And I think that Craig lives a much more free and happy life, even though it's harder, than my older son does. And it's easier for me to relate to him and feel comfortable. I talk to him about life things and just sit and have those conversations. I would say, don't let the world set your standards. You look at your child. You look at who your child is, and you enjoy that child. Life is too short not to. And just enjoy who they are, and the heck with the world. That's kind of where you have to get to. So.
Thank you for being patient with my questions and answering very honestly. before we open it up to questions, I just wanted to make a note that the number one determinant of homeless youth is actually being queer, and is considerably higher for genderqueer individuals. So I want to thank you for coming and speaking about raising families in a multitude of different ways. I feel like we've had a lot of different experiences here, but also all of you for coming and wanting to learn about it, and making society safer for not only ourselves but also America's youth, because they're the ones who need it. So, that being said, questions?
I have a 2-year-old daughter, and I don't know if she was just being silly sometimes, but a few months ago, she was on this kick for just a week or two, and she would say, "I'm a boy, Mommy, I'm a boy," I caught myself saying once, "Oh, you're a girl," and I thought, "Oh God, what am I saying?" I don't want to kind of put this gender identity or something onto her. But, and then, sometimes she'd laugh about it, and then she was also kind of in the silly stage where she was calling me a boy, not a girl, but I don't, she does, I don't know, I guess it's just accept whatever, any advice there? Just let it be, or?
I would just let her be and find out, try to just go say, why are you a boy today? Or, just take that chance to explore with them and talk with them. Craig used to dress up, and I remember thinking, well, it's just, I think we have both, we have both sides. We have what the world determines to be male characteristics and female characteristics. And I remember thinking when Craig would dress up in dresses when he was little, thinking, oh, it's just, phase. It's just something that, he's exploring that side of him. But, he's a boy. But that was just who he was. And that was his expressing himself and me denying it. And, but, it's if it's who they are, it's who they are. And let them feel safe around you. Let them feel like they can talk to you about it, because they're going to need that as they get older and more out in the world. They're going to need to feel like it's okay for me to talk with my mom about this and be who I am around my mom and my family. I think, that's one thing that's really interesting is that Craig and I talked about one time is that when a person, like going back to race, a person's born into a family, the whole family struggles with that. The whole family struggles with what is it like in the world to be a certain color and not accepted. But the whole family doesn't struggle with being, gender queer. That's so different. I mean, our whole family, it struggles with Craig's identity. And, his brother, my brother struggles with it. My dad. I mean, it's hard because not only do they have a heart in the world, but they don't have a family that understands that a lot of times either. And unless that family is willing to make it safe for them and accept that, then they don't even have a safe place at home, and that's really sad when you think about it. I wished I would have been more accepting when Craig was little, where he felt that he could have been, talked to me more about it. I think he always felt safe at home, but he didn't feel always accepted until later. Now he does, but I wish I could have given him that earlier.
If I can add to that really quick, as the person who experienced this, she doesn't give herself enough credit either, because I would come downstairs, looking fantastic. and Mom always, I remember my dad would get so annoyed because Mom would always say, "You're such a pretty girl," and I was like, "Yes, I am." So I think those things really reinforced, and I don't think Mom gives herself more enough credit for those things. So.
I was thinking, I have a friend who's I'm almost 30 and we're similar age, and I remember one time them telling me, she's a cisgendered white woman, identifies, that's how they identify, that's fine. But I remember her kind of being like, coming from like, I'm from Oregon, we're kind of like from super crunchy families, like granola and hippie, and kind of we raise our own, produce and all of that. And her family always kind of being like over the top. It's okay if you're not a cisgendered girl. It's okay if you wanna. And her always being like, no, I'm a girl. It's cool. I'm straight. And I don't mean straight as in like gender, as in like I'm good. And her family was just thinking, oh, but it's totally cool if you're not. She'd be like, oh, but I am. But it's okay if you're. So is there to a point that it doesn't behoove us as parenting? I'm not a parent yet, but is there a point where it doesn't behoove us to be so encouraging of people to be so different? Like, it's cool that, it's true, the world is, there are boxes, and many people fit into them, and many things fit into them. There's, things start and things end. And so is there a point when we should maybe let people just, to encourage being like, yeah, no, you are a girl. If at some point you want to not be. But, like, it's weird
She's
because.
not being heard. She just never got heard.
Maybe.
I mean, to me, just respect would be, okay,
Sure.
thanks for letting us know.
Right.
Like, to keep questioning, it's like, it's just not a respect thing. If you tell me something about yourself and I say, well, that's okay, but it also could be different.
Right.
It makes a weird lack of respect.
And of course, it seems that the family was just trying to be like, we're super fluid on whatever goes, we're down for the get down. But it wasn't being heard that she was like, but this is how I am. I understand my family's totally radical and crazy. I'm just kind of, vanilla, and I'm not as crazy radical as my family.
Yeah.
And so she felt very, not to the point where she was like, God, those homo people, but it almost put her off to people who were radical. Because she was like, God, it got shoved down my throat, and it just was not me.
Yeah.
So to a point, it's like, should we be more strict on guidelines sometimes, also on the flip side?
I think so. As the example I shared of Simon asking Oliver each morning, felt like being a boy or a girl, that actually happened to him. Whereas finally like, Dad, I'm a boy. I'm gonna be a boy for a while. And he's like, okay. So yeah, I think so. I think also that I think the most important guiding principle is that kids feel comfortable talking about gender. Similar to like race, like I went to this really good white privilege conference and there was like a parenting thing, and mother brought something out where like her child had made like something like they were driving through a neighborhood and said something like, why do all the black families have like rundown houses? And she had asked the kind of the facilitator, like, how do you respond to that? Like, I can't believe she said that, blah, blah, blah. And the moderator was like, well, they didn't actually have any, like, you might have read into a lot of the tone, like, judgment. You might have projected a lot of judgment into that statement. Like, it kind of sounds like your child was verbalizing something they had noticed. And when I was a teacher, I noticed this, that that any sort of observation of race was immediately like, oh, you can't say that, that's racist. And that was one of the, someone at that same conference that talked about how like anti-racism, like white anti-racism had evolved to this point where the discussion of race had become racist. And that how dangerous that is. If like we can't talk honestly about these issues, then there's no way that we can transform those things. And kids are they don't have those filters and they don't have a lot of, and so I think it's that same way with gender. Like my kids, and I don't know anyone who doesn't do, they categorize, they start making sense of the world as Whitney and Lynn were talking about. Sometimes it's through play, sometimes it's through just saying things, and my kids would do this. And I think the hilarious example was with Obsidian when he went through this kick of like, this is a girl thing, this is a boy thing. But he like always would get it wrong, like it'd be like, pink is a boy color, you know? Like purple's a boy color. It's like, okay. And so, yeah, but allowing kids to, I don't know, because I see that too, like in our community, like, oh, like that's not anyone can do that, anyone can do this, da 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 da. But I think they're just making sense of the boxes that do exist and that people are portraying. And so I think there is something valid of acknowledging, like, yes, most girls do wear dresses, like, and whys, and then you can kind of get into the whys and the discussions. But yeah, maybe that's one way of approaching it, is like acknowledging these patterns they're noticing, but then still allowing for like further dialogue and more nuanced understanding that's maybe appropriate.
I guess I always thought of it as being parenting neutral. Like, they're gonna get a lot of that, like, this is where you fit out there in the world. And so really having a space where your kids know that they will always be accepted. And it's not about every day being like, are you sure you don't wanna wear a dress? You know, it's just like, if you wanna wear a dress, cool, that's fine. I'm gonna be just as, like, great, you know, and I think, it sounds like Clayton's talked about it already, I'm so sorry, but, yeah, you know, I mean, my oldest son, very cisgender, but when he went through a phase where he wore pink sparkly shoes, and that was like his favorite thing, but he always identified as a boy, and it was just like, cool, okay, pink sparkly shoes versus transformer shoes, like, whatever, they're shoes, you know what I mean? Like, if it's just, I think that that's like, in the end, when they always feel like they have a place to be safe and be themselves, and a soft place to fall, regardless of what the world is out there, and I think that's a lot of what you were saying too, is like, the most important thing, and then it's not about trying to pen them for them, it's allowing them space to pen themselves and just be like, awesome.
On the other side of that, like what you were saying, I have to be really cautious in my own parenting. I have 4 kiddos, and I have a 15-year-old who identifies as pansexual or queer, cisgender female, identifies as a girl but is really okay with any pronoun, presents fairly masculine. And I have to be really careful not to like project my shit all over her. Because I'm like, oh God, like when she sort of, I guess, came out to me, it wasn't like, gee mom, I like girls. It was, I'm really sad I have a crush on my best friend and she likes boys and I'm really sad about it. So I'm really glad that's what that looked like. But then for me, it was like, yay, okay, let's go to Rainbow Alley and let's do it. And it's been really me having to temper that and be like, cool, I have a queer kid. My experience with that as a teenager was fairly negative. There was not a lot of support. I'm going to support her, but I also really need to like pull back and be like, oh gosh, sorry, Sedona, you can, whatever you, I mean, it's great. And she's great. And she's actually a youth leader and she will school anyone in this room if they make any kind of a comment that is ableist or anything. I'm 37 and every now and then the word lame will come out of my mouth. I'm really, really, really sorry. And she'll call me on it. And I appreciate that. But sometimes she's like, Mom, it's cool. I don't want to go to Rainbow Alley today. I want to stay home and play my drums. I'm okay. And for me to just have to sit with that and be like, okay. And for me, I'm realizing and I'm recognizing how much of my identity is wrapped up in that. And then my 2 middle children are very cisgendered at this point in their lives. They are a boy and a girl. You know my kiddos, they are like, and he's like, boys always roar, beat things, kill things. And she's like, la-da-da-da. And I'm really having to, again, like, temper that. My son used to like to wear toenail polish. And now he doesn't. That's not a boy thing. And I have to really bite my tongue and be like, well, you guys don't wear nail polish. What if we wear orange nail polish and call it super Ultraman nail polish? Like, and so I think it is. It's like we really, as parents, need to make a conscious choice that, like, if my kids really want to, like, in our house, our joke is that one of our kids will grow up to be, what was Michael J. Fox's character's name? I'm gonna
Alice P. Keaton.
Yes, that's like my worst fear ever, and I'm gonna have to love that child nonetheless because inevitably one of them will become totally heteronormatively conservative something.
Well,
it's a good joke. Yeah, come on, no. So I think there's that piece too, where like I can shove radical down my kids' throat all I want, and I'm actually doing damage by denying their story and not hearing their story. And if my 15-year-old comes to me and says, yeah, I have a crush on a boy, I need to be like, okay, cool. Yeah, darn it. Now we have to talk about actual safe sex with like that thing. Like, our conversations have been pretty easy up until now about like dental dams and okay, you're good. So yeah, but I think you bring up such a good point. Is that especially within communities where we think pretty radically and openly, we have to be really careful not to project our own stuff.
Well, I was just going to say that I think that the temperate approach is the best approach, and there can't be, you can't have a middle ground without a spectrum. The problem isn't with these polar opposites of male and female and butch and femme. The problem is with the things that we attach to them, and that we don't allow people to transgress those things comfortably. And I did feel very supported in my youth. Mom definitely had more issues with my sexuality over my gender. My gender felt very supportive. I wanted a glitter wig. Mom's buying me a glitter wig. I want to play in the pumps. Go pump away. Go have fun. But I also, did whatever I wanted. And I think that the thing that was so helpful for me is that, and I was telling people, my mom is such a mom. She's the mom. Because she was so genuinely engaged and supportive in anything I wanted to do. I want to play football. She didn't say, you're a sissy, you can't play football. Which she should have. I was miserable at it. And I heard 2 games and it was flag football, and I was just I don't know what. And just dropped it. It was no. But she was so supportive. That's great. You want to play, but I want to put on a dress. That's what you look. You're such a pretty girl. It was genuine support. She was really interested in me. And that's one of the things that because some people who know me in other parts of my life say, I've heard people ask, your mom uses son, your mom uses, he's you all the time. And I know that you use gender mixed pronouns. And I'm you know what? My mom is genuinely involved and into my life for almost 31 damn years now. We're good. I don't have to have the pronouns conversation with mom. We're good. Because she is so genuinely interested in my life and supportive in my life. And that's what it is. It's not, go be straight, go be gay, go be genderqueer, go be whatever. It's, what are you? And yay! Good job. Whatever that is. So.
I have a question. I'm an educator. I'm faculty here on campus, but I also work with high school youth all the time around the issue of teen dating violence and healthy relationships. And when I have the gender talk, both with college age youth or college adults, really, I often have mothers or parents in my class who are beginning to take women's studies for the very first time, or thinking about gender for the very first time, and they're freaking out, and they, are desperate to protect their children in a lot of ways that you all spoke today too, and specifically around the media piece, media and advertising in the way gender is socialized through, the 3,000 ads a day that we're exposed to as people. And so I get a lot of mothers, saying that they don't want their young daughters to read Cosmo Girl, and that, they don't let them watch television, and I always, want to insert my own opinion about critical engagement with mass media as the great parenting piece of advice, but I'm not a parent, so I often I often don't want to appear to be a self-righteous faculty member who seems to have all the answers. So I'm curious about how you feel, or what your ideas are, or how do you engage with your youth or with your kids around mass media and media representations of gender, and do you have those conversations, and what would you recommend, or what advice would you give to maybe young parents who are doing this for the first time and freaking out about it? No pressure.
I might have something to add, actually, if I could. So my daughter's 5.5, and the other day she was like, "Oh, I want to look like the Barbie doll, with the blonde hair and the ponytail." And I just was like, not everyone has hair like that. Not everyone looks like that.
Actually, only 5%.
I mean, it's from the media, and it's from everything that they see with Barbies and TV and it being all white. I just we went on YouTube, and I showed her pictures, and then she started asking me about Native American women, and so we went on, and we YouTube a lot and Google, and she's like, let's just Google it. And so, we do it together. And after I showed her all these different pictures, she was just like, oh, okay. And I'm like, well, it's not everyone looks like that. I don't know. So I just wanted to add that. So it's just having those conversations of the spectrum of people. But I think our culture definitely the blonde ponytail Barbie and everything's perfect and your body looks perfect and I just want to, remind her that it's not that way. And so we do talk about that stuff.
It's hard because our world goes so much on looks and appearance, I think it's both sides get it, men are supposed to be this way, women are supposed to look this way. And I think it's more about what's inside.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the conversations that you have to have with kids and parents, is it doesn't matter if you fit into the world view of a man and woman. What matters is who are you and what makes you happy and what are your talents and what are your gifts, and explore those and find out who you are and give them a safe place to find out who they are. And don't, like what you were saying, don't force on them, that it's okay to just say it's okay to not fit into these boxes if you don't want it. Kids are going to teach you, kids are going to do this, but it's okay. That's just their opinion, and it's only their opinion for a short time. You do what you feel comfortable doing. What's interesting is it's not ever going to be safe. That's what's hard. It's not going to be safe until it's accepted, and either they're going to be who they are to the world, and there's going to be some danger to that, or they're going to stifle who they are, and there's danger to that. Would it be better for them to be who they are and at least be free and happy and possibly have some hatred towards them, or would it be better to stifle that and they're miserable all their lives because they're not who they should be?
I just want to, sorry, I want to get back to the original intent behind critical engagement, if we can, for a second, because I think that's a really good question. And Kimberlee, you also haven't been answering, so I definitely want to hear your voice in this conversation.
Well, I did have a response to that one. Critical engagement,
Maybe, should I explain?
Go for it.
So we can have a group definition of critical engagement. I'm sorry.
I guess it's sort of the idea that you don't try and limit your kids to exposure of, media representations of gender, but rather you critically engage in conversations around those media representations.
That's my experience with my kids. I definitely don't limit what their exposure is, but I do try to help them see and recognize, just because, I'm older and I have more experience than them, many of those characters are caricatures, and that's not realistic in a lot of ways, and here's why. And if we see something that's, I would consider, unacceptable from my perspective, I might comment and say, wow, that's kind of a sad way to treat that person. And there's something that, the way they say that's, they don't know what this person's attractions are or whatever. It's kind of judgmental to talk that way. And so my kids, it's more of a teach by, you just behave the way that you model the behavior that you think the world should, ultimately get to, or do love and accept each other. People can be comfortable to be who they are and express themselves however they want to. So that's what my experience is with my kids. My wife is a little bit not quite the same way. I almost feel like a lot of times I have to do damage control because she is a little bit more, she's a lot more open and accepting of diversity than the average person, but still has a lot of preconceptions and judgments, and I try to show my kids that we don't even know what's going on with these people. We're not in a position that we can judge, and it's really, they have to decide for themselves who and what they are and how they interact with everybody.
Can I dissent a little bit from what's been said? We've talked about this.
Dissent, go for it.
I'm not actually interested in what you have to say.
That's another session. I I think that mass media is predatory, and I think that there is a lot of media that is geared towards children that is really destructive. And I think that the sexualization of girls in particular is insane. And it's worse, I think it's worse now than it was like 10 years ago. So I certainly think it's worth protecting especially young children from as much of that as possible, but in a way that goes back to what we had kind of talked about earlier, which is, and this is an experience I keep hearing from a lot of people, is either kids or parents about their kids, that line of communication is just so important, that I be able to talk to my kids about their interests without them feeling like they have to hide something, and that go one way or another. That if Obsidian is really into this band and they have some like sexist leanings or like songs that I think are questionable, or like that we'd be able to talk about that openly. So I think there's a little bit of both, but I think especially young children, like it's worth trying to hold some of that back against them. And like Bella said, like, you are what you see. And it does affect us. And so I don't think it's as simple as like you can watch whatever you want and just critically engage with it, especially when you're young. I don't think that there's just some things that as a kid you just can't take that in as a kid. I don't know.
I think they don't take in the critical, but they do take it in.
They take it in, yeah. Right, but it's like,
But they're not ready.
But they're not ready to. Exactly. Yeah.
They're not ready to process it.
Yeah. And I also think I think that it's more powerful as parents to show what we do love than when they get to that stage, like Obsidian's at that point now, man. It's just like forget about it. It's like 10. I can't shelter him much, you know? But what I can do is I can show him like the awesome Riot Girl bands that I love. And I can show him like DIY videos that play with gender in cool ways. Or, you know, so showing them those other and like what you were doing with the YouTube stuff, I think is super powerful.
We just look at pictures and stuff.
Or like another tool that I think we use with Obsidian a lot, because you can't shelter him from everything, but I mean, I always think about it as he's getting older too, about treating him like I would any other adult who maybe isn't as like savvy or whatever, and saying like, wow, I get it, you heard that at school and you like that because your friends like it, but you can't listen to that around me because I don't like it because this is why, and I find it offensive, and so if you listen to it with your friends at school, you listen to it with your friends at school, but I want you to know how I feel about it and why it's not allowed in this house. Just like if you had a roommate who was doing something that you found disrespectful, you'd say, dude, you can't do that. But I also do talk to my kids a lot about how you are kids, and like you only have this little time in your life that is so special to do that, and part of my job as your parent is to protect you from having to take on more than you're ready for, even though I know you feel that you're ready for it, because I was a kid and I get it. But I was going to say about the Barbie stuff too, I'm sorry really fast, is that once again I think, and I'm not saying that you're not doing this, but I think that it's an important thing, that's where questions come into play again. Why do you think Barbie's so pretty? What is it about her that you want to look like? Because maybe it is just the ponytail. Maybe it has nothing to do with the color of her hair, color of her skin, maybe it's her pretty dress. You know, so like what is it about Barbie that you're wanting to emulate? Like, is it something, can we put your hair in a ponytail just like that? And that's not harmful. Or, gee, I get that you want to be blonde, but that's not who you are, and so that's okay. Yeah, and always parenting by example too, and you know, making sure that you're acknowledging the beauty that you see in different people without having to put it on them, but just saying, wow, you know, Rebecca looks so pretty today, you know, you look so gorgeous, you know, or just always like, I think that being loving and complimentary towards people just teaches your children to be loving and open and complimentary towards people too. So I really love that you said that.
Actually, sorry, she beat you in back, everyone.
I just wanted to thank you guys. I definitely have learned a lot just in this last, I don't know how long we've been sitting here. But this is something I've really struggled with. I thought I'd come in here and kind of learn a little bit more professionally and how to care for my clients, but in fact, like, this really is a lot to my life. I have a 4.5-year-old little girl that for this girl is my best friend, and she knows for years I've been, honestly, like 2 years saying, I'm concerned. My daughter keeps telling me she wants to be a boy. She has crushes on girls. she wants these boy clothes, these boy toys, and I don't know how to deal with it. Like, what do I do? And everyone that I go to talk about this, for the most part, like my mom and other people, they pretty much are just like, oh, it'll be okay. It's just a phase, she'll get over it. It's, it's never been like, wow, let her explore that, or like, why would it hurt something to let her wear boy clothes? And my husband's actually been a lot more open to this whole process than I have. He grew up with 2 brothers, and he grew up in double plays, and he wants her to play hockey, and he's like fine with it, like her embracing her more masculine side. But I'm a girly girl, and I'm like, I wanted a girly girl daughter, and this is not what I signed up for. Like, what's going on here? And so this has really kind of opened my eyes. I thought, like, she's so little, how could she, like, at this age really know who she is and what she wants? But kind of what I'm taking from you guys is like, if this is who she wants to be today, then let her be who she is today. And if tomorrow she decides she wants to wear, a Transformers shirt or wear boys' shoes to school, then let her do that. Like, I have been trying to kind of put her into a box, and I've been trying to push the girly things on her, and I'm kind of realizing, like, that can be harmful, even at this age. She's not even 5 yet, but she's been very much, and it's been consistent for the last, like, 1.5 to 2 years that she's been pretty adamant on, like, kind of wish I was a boy, and, like, just that she totally has crushes on girls in school, so, thank you guys, this has opened my eyes a lot.
I don't want to jump on a turn, but just for the same, our oldest children are the same age. Can you give advice? We have conversations all the time about some people are girls, some people are boys, some people are tall and short and white skin, dark, all different people. But gender is not something that I really thought that much before. Can you give advice as to what kind of language to use with younger children as to gender? Like, should I girly? Should I mean, with that, is that bad? I don't know. I guess I want to include that in our conversation of everybody's different and it's great to be that, but can you speak to that kind of language?
And can I just for 1 second be the moderator role? Great question, and I just want to sit with the fact that as adults we also have to be comfortable with not knowing and asking questions. So thank you, and I think everyone here recognizes that you're coming from a place of good. So don't feel like you have to. If you don't know the language, using the right language is impossible. So thank you for asking. And now I'm going to throw it to people who actually know what they're talking about. But I wanted to have a teaching moment there.
Well, I kind of want to make a comment that ties into both of those issues. First, with your daughter liking boys and stuff, I think it would be important to make sure that you raise your kids to understand that gender and gender identity and gender presentation has no relationship to attraction or whatever. One of the things that threw me off most of my life was my attraction is for girls, and it just, all the examples of transgender women that I saw in the media and stuff, the very few, were, they wanted to be June Cleaver, they wanted to be June Cleaver married to the macho man and be the housewife and everything. And I was attracted to women, and I'm like, okay, so I guess I'm not whatever that trans thing is, so I don't understand what I am. How do I fit in? Along with, this is Satan making me feel this way, so there's a lot of that in my head. And it wasn't until we moved out here about 9 years ago, I found a book. I tried researching on the internet, and all I could find was female porn type stuff. It was so hard to find legitimate information about transgender issues. I had no language to know what it was. But ultimately I found a book called Gender Outlaw, and started reading the examples of people whose life experience was what I felt. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one. And that's probably a healthy thing for a kid to understand, if they are different or feel different, they're not the only one, and it's okay. And that was the beginning of being able to accept myself. And it was just amazing. And then just coming up with that life, just meeting so many different people and everything. Now I lost track of what your question was.
I want to make sure that I'm using appropriate language, I guess, is my question. And I think I know, but I would be honest, I've like Googled a few words in here that you guys have used because I don't know, and see I'm blushing. But I want to be respectful.
Cis.
Yes.
Cisgender.
Cisgender, never heard it. So
Yeah.
cis is when your gender identity and the biology that you were born with matches.
Okay.
So I don't want to assume your identity, but based on presentation, I would guess that both of you were cis.
Yes.
Example.
Really
Yes.
quickly about cis, it's CIS, and it's a Latin prefix, which means from whence it came.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was not
This is why
on
we find
Wikipedia.
She's over here on her phone, like while you guys are talking.
And I'm
We're
showing her because I know.
"This mean?"
Yeah, because I just.
And that's
So I apologize
Yeah.
that we.
No, that's really important, and I do want to drive home to everyone that, you know, there are some people who really get gender in this room, and there are some people who are learning. But those same people who really get gender might not get other things and have to Google things in other realms. So do not feel like just because you're Googling in this room doesn't mean that you don't own it somewhere else, where someone else is less sure of themselves. And that unsure is really important, and really important to sit with and to ask questions about. So I cannot get over the fact, and kind of can't let it go. So I'm sorry, I'm stealing all the space. But thank you for asking, and do not feel ashamed.
Okay.
And
That's why we're here, is to learn, really.
just the fact that you're willing to talk, period, is good. I mean, I hate it when people get so caught up, and I don't mean to sense you, but when, like, if you ever said something wrong and somebody jumped on you for that, that's not right. I mean, the fact that you're willing to talk about it and discuss it and learn about it is great. And you shouldn't be worried about, you know, are you using the right, like, verbiage and stuff. I mean, I do that around my Craig sometimes, you know, I worry about how, you know, do I say the right things, but that's not the important part. The important part is what's your intent.
That's the thing. The last thing I want to ever want to do is offend somebody. So I really want to make sure that I want to make sure that
I think getting to your question, because I think what you were asking is what language do you actually use in that conversation?
Yeah.
And I think the easiest way to do that, especially, you know, children are, the nice thing about kids is that, you know, they're picking up these language things all the time, so it gets really natural for them. So I think just letting them know, like, oh, well, there's boy people, and there's girl people, and there's people who are neither, and there's people who are both, and there's a lot of different ways to be a person, and it doesn't matter what your body is, you know, your brain and who you are is who you are, and those things, you know, there's a lot of different configurations there. And I think if you just like nice and, you know,
simple.
I just, you know, level those things in there. My nephew is like that, you know. And I love him. He's just, you know, he's as awful as I was when I was a kid. He just like walks up and like, you stink. And I'm like, do I? And, you know, just honest to a hilt. And so be honest to a hilt back. And they pick that up.